All right, back on the conversation on the TYT network. Now, we do a lot of thought-provoking conversations, but this one is even more so, if you will. Okay, should America be considered a racist pariah state and maybe even boycotted? Elie Mystal joins us. He's a justice correspondent at The Nation. So we talked about last time. I love the title Justice Correspondent, and I love your thought-provoking piece here in The Nation. So the title of it is "The U.S. needs to be treated like the racist pariah state that it is." So Elie, let you take it away with your case for why that is.
Well, it's not so much a case for. Like the point here is not the case for why America is racist. I don't think that I have to really explain anymore why America is racist and the history of oppression that African Americans especially, but darker people in general have faced in this country. The interesting thing to me, and the reason why I wrote the piece, is that the George Floyd protests represent the first time in my lifetime where it seems like the international community is starting to notice the kind of oppression and brutality that Black Americans have complained about for some time. You've seen Black Lives Matter inspired protests around the globe in every European country, I think, Australia, Brazil, South Africa, of course. So it's really gone global. Many of these people are also protesting kind of structural injustices and oppression in their own countries and communities, but they're also claiming solidarity with the American struggle, and that is really different. That has not happened in my life. If that's where we are, if the global community is willing to join us in this struggle, I think that we could see real kind of international solidarity around this moment, trying to push back against the American version of white supremacy and the American version of racial oppression.
Yeah, so there's a couple of really interesting avenues here. So of course you're right that America being considered racist is not new, but whether we should be boycotted based on that is new. And I have not seen that in a lot of other places. And you credit Reverend Mark Thompson for coming up with the idea. Well, let me start it with it this way. What do you think the ramifications of that are, and do you expect that there'd be that the idea will get taken seriously, or will the establishment, who is generally in favor of the status quo, push back and go, no, that's a bridge too far?
I mean, I just saw a bunch of teenagers who generally like K-pop just destroy a Donald Trump rally, right? Just like that, right? So you can't tell me that where we are right now in the world, given social media, given the speed of communication, you can't tell me that Gen Z can't get down here and put some real economic pressure on some of these American companies. Look, I think it's one of the big differences between where the United States is now and where South Africa was, where white South Africa was, say in 1985, is that the USA is the biggest economy in the world. You can't divest from America in the way that the international community could divest from South Africa, I don't think. I mean, like, I'm no economist. I'm pretty sure that Credit Suisse isn't leaving the New York Stock Exchange anytime soon. So like those kinds of issues, I think, are too much to hope for and too much to ask for. But a global movement focused on the racism and oppression in this country that puts pressure on American corporations to stand against and stand opposed to the kind of police brutality that we've seen, that could do something. And in fairness, we have already seen American corporations react to these protests differently than at any time before, right? NASCAR's had a Confederate flag problem for the entirety of NASCAR, but now they're changing it, right? Black people have been complaining about the racial stereotypes of Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben for 7 years. But now those people are off the boxes, right? And that's all American corporations not caring about black or white, but caring about green. And if you have an international movement caring about green, that can hurt Apple, that can hurt Disney. And once the corporations are really feeling it, you might see a whole different kind of movement around getting a handle on our problem of police brutality and bias.
Yeah, so like I said, there's so many avenues here. So first off, let me note, as I did on Monday's Young Turk show, that it should be deeply embarrassing that the Democratic Party, that a bunch of underage Korean music fans have done more to damage Donald Trump than the entire Democratic Party. But it really does go to your point, Ellie, that this movement is so international and sometimes so lightning quick, and so you never know the effect that it could have. But the first thing that you're gonna run against is people are gonna say, well, what are you hitting Apple and Disney for? They didn't do it, and they've actually been pretty good on a lot of the racial diversity issues. And so is that an ironic thing? And will it hurt the economy here in America, and then hence hurt black folks too? So I'm positive, I'm asking you these questions in a legitimate intellectual way. The mainstream media will blare them out in a way that I think will be overwhelming. But what's your take on that?
Well, of course it would hurt African Americans too. Of course, if the goal is to put economic pressure on the United States, black people live here too. That's putting economic pressure on black people as well. But again, these are the same arguments that white South Africa made in the 80s. Like these are not new, and certainly black South Africans will tell you that as the community, as the international community started the real push towards moral suasion to sanction the white South African regime, that their first response was to carry out kind of more brutalization and more torture and more punishment on the black citizens of South Africa. So obviously there's always a boomerang effect when you try to pull to mess with the levers of economic sanction, and again, kind of moral shame. You know, like one of the real moments, again, in my upbringing, and I'm in my early 40s, so I don't have an adult's appreciation for the entire apartheid struggle. I have a child's appreciation for it. I have a formative years appreciation for it. But one of the big formative moments, I think, in that struggle was when South Africa was kicked out of the Olympics. Right, when people understood that you couldn't even invite them into the international community. Can you imagine what white America how they would freak out if we were kicked out of the Olympics? And again, the Olympics, a lot of our sports heroes are on the leading edge of our more tolerant kind of citizens, right? Not only is our international sporting teams incredibly diverse, kind of diverse on the world stage, but I stand for U.S. women's soccer, right? We are respected around the world for our sporting prowess, and yet, if those teams are disinvited from international tournaments, if we're kicked out of the Olympics, if we're kicked out until there's actual change and there's an actual lessening of oppression in this country, that would make a statement. It would be collective harm, to be sure, but for a very specific, I think, collective gain in terms of arguing against trying to fight the white supremacy that we have here in this country.
Yeah, and let's not forget that the bus boycotts also made it very difficult for black folks down in the South, and it caused them great economic pain, let alone having to walk to work and physical pain that came along with it. But at the end of the day, it worked, and that's part of why the right wing in Israel is so scared of the BDS movement, because economic pressure works. And so
my mom was born in 1950 in Mississippi. She walked a lot. She had, that old joke like, I used to have to walk uphill both ways, but my mom can tell that story. She's not making a joke when she tells that story.
Yeah, that's right. And so these boycotts are not devoid of pain, but that's part of the point. which is to cause enough economic pain so that people change, and usually that's the only thing that leads to change. And so it's a bold and really interesting idea. But I did want to ask one more thing about that, Ellie. So, in China during the coronavirus, they started discriminating against black people and throwing them out of their house as if they caused it. Wait a minute. Look, we fight against Donald Trump when he calls the Chinese virus, etc. But certainly black people in China didn't cause it. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
And then, and I can give you 1,000 examples. Do they get to do a boycott of our racism?
Yeah, so very quickly, I would just say that any kind of boycott on this level would not be top down. It would not be from the government down. It would be from the people up. I don't want to hear Britain talking about racism until they give back some jewels to India, right? Like there are a lot of European countries that have, that do not have clean hands on this issue. But if it comes up from the people, and that's what we're seeing with the George Floyd protests, if it comes up from the people, that's a whole different kind. It's a whole different kind of movement. It's a whole different kind of potential for solidarity.
All right, Ellie Mistel, justice correspondent at The Nation, finding a new avenue for justice. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack.
Like what you see? Click the subscribe button below and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from the Young Turks.